All right, thanks so much. I think it's really great to see everyone in person again, just having a chat with some of you just now. I think today, I think we have a very interesting panel, and I think we can walk away with some interesting insights after this to really discuss what's happening in the tech industry and what people like PR folks or even media and journalists who are working in the tech sector, what we can learn or what we can do better this year. So maybe just some introduction. I think the discussion will take maybe 40-45 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor later to Q&A. For those of you who are online, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat at any time, right? Okay, I think you don't really want to hear from me, so let's hear from our panelists. Without further ado, maybe we can get our panelists to introduce themselves and maybe share one fun fact about why you like being in tech.
Just because I'm next to you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here and thank you for inviting me to this panel. You can read my CV. My name is Grace Chng. You can read my CV on LinkedIn. So I don't want to bore you with whatever. I want to share with you what I do. So I consider myself an orchestra conductor and a connector. So I orchestrate different elements to bring different musicians and different instruments together to create. So create new compositions, interpret existing compositions, or just do something fun and new. So my three compositions are my three books that I have written and published. The third one has just come out. And then I created Computer Times and Digital Life, bringing together different elements. And my latest venture in Deeptech Times, covering the deep tech industry, and also transformlife.sg, which is a publication of SG Tech. I consider myself a connector because I connect technologies, vendors with readers, and readers with readers. And the reason is I want people to share. I want to be able to translate the technology so that people can understand that better. But I also am a connector of young girls and women, which is my passion project. And I need to give a shout out for this because it's called SG 100 Women in Tech, and nominations are open this year. I curated the list, so come and talk to me afterwards and we'll see how we can help each other. So the connector is important because you connect dots and then you see trends, which I can then share with readers and with people like yourselves. And connecting the community, especially women in tech community, is important because it is to get more women into STEM. For me, it is to get a pipeline of women into STEM and tech. So the fun fact is I still like tech after 30 years, more than 30 years. Because it is new, it is always new. It allows me to learn GPT-4 yesterday, tomorrow GPT-5, right? So I think it is always a continually learning journey.
Very much, Grace. I'm Yanina Blaclard, so I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications of Horizon Quantum Computing. So it's quantum computing company, and we are building software tools to compile classical code on quantum processors. And so I'm a connector, so I'm rather connecting our science team to more general public. Although we go progressively, and until a few years ago, quantum computing was more of a niche topic in some specialized media. We had this great achievement of having quantum computing on the cover of the Business Times in December, and then on the cover of Time a month ago. So we see this progress into connecting quantum computing with more general public, although it will be a long path. And about what I like about new technologies, it's the feeling of a new beginning. So I love it when you move from one country to another, when you restart a new journey, and in new technologies, you always have this feeling that you're discovering something new and you are at the very beginning. And I think I'm very lucky with quantum computing. We are really now at the very beginning of history.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. My name is Upali Dasgupta. I run marketing at Meltwater for Asia Pacific and Japan. We're in a room of PR and comms professionals, so I'm hoping most of you have heard about Meltwater. But for those of you who haven't, it's a media intelligence and social media intelligence platform, and we work with marketers, PR and comms professionals to help them understand insights about their brands, competitors, and their consumers. I've been in tech and marketing for the last 19 years. I started my career as a programmer, a computer engineer, back in 2004 when it was IT and not sexy tech as it is today. And I've seen IT transform into tech. And I moved into marketing a few years later, and the convergence of marketing and technology and this landscape of MarTech that we're all in has been really exciting. And I feel like every year I've had a different job just because of how fast things are moving and how fast innovation has happened in the last few years.
Thank you. I mean, thanks to all our panelists for the very exciting introduction. I think we can all agree that tech is going to be and continues to be a very exciting industry. But I think of late in the last few months, we've obviously heard quite a lot of negative news about the tech industry, some as recent as yesterday. So I think for all our panelists, do you think that this trend will continue? And what impact will it have on the consumers or the business decision makers or the investor community with whom we are trying to get our messages across to?
Let's start from the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're not seeing a decline in tech. We're seeing a normalization. The last few years of the pandemic, tech has grown at rates which have been unprecedented. That's probably the word of the decade. But I think businesses have planned in a way where they expect that growth to continue. And that's not realistic, that's not practical. And now we're in a phase of normalization where tech is still growing, but not at the same rates as we were seeing in the last 2 years. And so the negative news that you're seeing is linked to that normalization. But just before coming to this event, actually yesterday, I ran a search on our platform for the technology industry to see what kind of sentiment we were seeing. And interestingly, in the last month, I used that as the time, we're seeing an equal, it's almost like a 50-50 split of negative and positive. The negative is obviously like layoffs, the Silicon Valley Bank bankruptcy, but the positive is innovation and ChatGPT. So I think, as PR and comms professionals, it's our job to focus on the positives and tell those stories. And it's just an example, not from the tech industry, but like a few years ago, there was some changes in India. There was a new political party that came in, rise of a lot of negative sentiments around nationalism, etc. And there was this publication that was born in the midst of that negativity called The Better India. And it was started by someone who said, there's enough negativity in the world, let's just focus on the positive stories. And the readership of that publication has just gone through the roof the last year. So I think there's like a lesson for us in the tech industry in that story.
Thank you. So maybe I will give an insight from the quantum computing perspective, because of course we see the sentiment that investors or clients have become more cautious in their approach. But in quantum computing, we have an ongoing threat, ongoing discussions on whether if we're going to have what we call quantum winter. So quantum computing isn't a mature technology, and so we are, as our scientists are always clear on the fact that it has risks, and there is still a risk of the hardware not getting to maturity and not being useful for businesses, and so there is this ongoing threat on whether the investment will continue to allow us to develop the technology to the maturity point. So when we speak about is there a particular negative sentiment? I would say that for the quantum computing industry, there's always a ghost of quantum winter that we hear on a monthly basis. Maybe we are a bit related from the other tech industry sentiment.
The tech industry is cyclical, so it has its ups and it has its downs. And I think, I don't know whether it's down or whether it's on the way up, but I think there's always a silver lining in every of this struggle, right? I believe, as I was sharing with Maida just now, we have to look at perspectives. We need to look at issues with perspective. So although there are headcount lost in tech companies, you have to find out how many they've employed prior to letting go 10,000 people, 20,000 people. Microsoft, for example, let go 10,000 people, I think, in January, but they didn't tell you that they employed 30,000 people the month before. So net, they still grew. So I think it behooves all of us as communicators to have perspective in what we communicate to people. The other is that whatever happens in Silicon Valley or London or China or Hong Kong, the tremor is always felt in Singapore, right? Because of connectivity, etc. So SVB Bank had a run, and everyone had a fright, and so we all set up. We had a robust banking system, so in Singapore we are fine. But then Credit Suisse also went and looked for money yesterday, right? And so now everyone is looking. So what does that mean for technology? What does it mean for tech startups? What does it mean for venture capital companies, right? So what do you do? I think some of these issues, we need to look at it in its totality. So we need to connect the dots and join the dots.
I think Grace and Upali make very interesting points about perspective and telling positive stories. Maybe I just want to hear a little bit more from you both. Where you see, whether it's in media conversations or it's online conversations, where you see some of the not so obvious negative topics that people are talking about that you think people in PR should maybe not so good to talk about this year. And on the flip side, what are some of the trending or more positive aspects you think that maybe these are areas that you can talk about, right? Grace was saying about how you put things into perspective. Sure, there's a negative side, but there's a lot more positives to what has happened in the last 2 years. So maybe hear from both of you about what you think around negative and positive aspects and what we can do about it.
So I think misinformation is one thing that will continue. I think that will not stop. And misinformation, because of the speed with which information travels today, I think we really need to look out for that. So we need to do due diligence. Right, that's number one. And I think we can talk about ChatGPT and reality later in this conversation. But also it is about how technology can be used for good or bad. So we have scams and phishing. And I have fallen into one of these phishing. I was not paying attention and I clicked on an email and my entire contact, my Rolodex was just spammed. And people were calling me in anyway. So you need to pay attention. So I think that tech used for bad, there will always be bad threat actors. So what is it that we need to do? I think that there's a lot of education that we can do. There's a lot of explaining that you can do. Digital trust and ethical AI, explainable AI, people think that they're such boring topics, but actually they are very important to you, your companies, and your company's customers, because people need to know what's inside that code, right? And that digital touches everything today. So you need to know that when I touch technology, I can trust it. So if I, go to park at SG, I touched it and it's not going to spam my credit card, but actually take just my parking money away. So we need to know this. So these are the not so good points. I think the positive is that tech can help people, and I think we don't tell enough of that story. So what are the press releases I received? Okay, nothing on you, because I think that you are all pressured by your clients. Plenty of new products from version 1 to version 5, and version 1 has got 10 features, version 5 has got 100 features. And then I got, I've got this new cloud that's coming up, etc., etc. So what's the impact? What's the impact on your community, on your customers, for example? So I went to Sengkang General Hospital a couple of days ago. And because they were going to show how AI is going to be used in endoscopy, colonoscopy. Right? So it is pattern recognition. It helps the doctor to recognize polyps that are not so obvious. So this is another form of AI, and it's really useful because it's going to be used routinely in Sengkang General Hospital in the first time in the world. Right? So this is AI for good. Right? So I want to hear and I want to know more of these stories.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the point that you made about misinformation, brand trust, those are really hot topics, if you will, and important topics to be discussed. A lot of you may have seen the Edelman Trust Barometer for 2023 that was recently published. I think it was on CNN yesterday. And the biggest takeaway this year, and it's been a trend that's been cropping up for the last few years, is that trust in governments and other institutions has been dropping, and corporates are being seen as the most trustworthy sources of information. And so, working in the tech industry, we have a responsibility to educate our audience on, what is, like fake news and what is not, and continue to build that trust for corporates amongst our audience. Another thing is, depending on which part of tech you work in, tech comes in many forms. There's quantum computing, there's social media listening. So I think it's broken down into three. I think you need to listen to what your audience is talking about. What do they care about? Social listening is one way of doing it. Media monitoring is another way of doing it. The second is understanding who your audience is, right? Like what kind of media do they consume? And making sure that you're targeting your stories through those channels. And then finally, context, right? Making sure that the channels that you're using to communicate your stories, the good stories, are within the right channels. And of late, we talk about trust, mistrust. Influencers are all the rage, right? Like influencers on TikTok and Instagram are influencing elections in countries around the world, right? And so, like, what is a safe way for tech companies to be engaging these influencers, finding them, and then what is the narrative that you develop with them? I think they're interesting topics to explore.
Yeah, I think trust in tech is definitely an important topic. I think that we can all talk about. I think if someone can find a way to help my mom understand that it's safe to buy things online and not have to ask me to do it all the time, even though she shows me the exact link to it, I think would be great. So I think just now we joked a little bit about the launch of GPT-4, and then maybe tomorrow is GPT-5. I think the pace of change of innovation has been so quick and so fast, right? And it become more and more complex, right? I mean, we just barely got used to GPT-3, and now it's 4, like people are still struggling to understand it. So I think maybe from a creator's perspective, right? As from a journalist perspective, does writing about this kind of new technologies make it more difficult? And for PR people like ourselves, how can we make your lives easier? And then on the flip side, for Yanina, right, you are in quantum computing, right? So maybe I'm going to put you in the spot a little bit. Maybe you can explain to us in simple terms what quantum computing is and how in your role you make it more understandable to the general public.
Sure. So what quantum computing is a new technology where we use some properties of phenomena of quantum physics, such as time or superposition, to do calculations. and to explain it to more of a general audience, we usually use an image of a coin. So for instance, when we had our chief scientist going on CNA, we were discussing, so how can we present it in a way that would be understandable? And so she took a point with her to explain, so the normal bit, you have heads and tails, and then that's how you calculate with zeros and ones. But then if you flip the coin, and it keeps flipping, it's zeros and ones at the same time. So this was a way to explain this superposition and how a qubit works as compared to a quantum to a classical bit. But of course, this analogy is interesting when you speak on CNA or if you speak to the Straits Times. This wouldn't work if you speak to more technical media. And for many years, we've been talking to pretty specialized media, and they are a key part of our audience. So we have this double effort of first communicating on the technology, because it also fosters the collaboration in our very niche industry. But on the other hand, there's this huge educational effort, and which is kind of particularly important because it's a very new technology, and corporates are seen as experts. So we have this very big responsibility in not overhyping it, in being very transparent on the fact that it's not mature, on the timelines where it can be available, and what could be the use cases for this technology. So yeah, it's a complicated exercise, and of course, when we work with scientists, it's a bit complete. Kind of, they have their limit to the simplification of the technology, saying, "Oh, we cannot." It has to be always scientifically accurate. So we invest time and time in the right words that would be understandable and accurate from the scientific side.
With ChatGPT, you don't need to be very accurate. So ChatGPT, you need to, well, with all generative AI tools, which is GPT, which is Dolly, Mid-Journey, Stable Diffusion, all of them need time, play around with it and to understand what it can do and what it can't do. And also, I think most importantly, understand that they are tools. They are not human beings. They are tools that do not understand, that do not suffer consequences of their action. Human beings suffer the consequences of their action. So I think we need to be able to understand that and to explain that. I use Dolly for some visual creation, simply because sometimes I can't find the free visual I want on, iStock photo or something. So I create it, but I also say, I explicitly say that this is created by Dolly. Okay, so I think that we need to be upfront. Technology is also a tool. So ChatGPT is a tool. I think it will boost productivity. Prior to all of this, a couple of years ago, I used a tool called Jasper. I don't know whether Jasper is something like a very early version. Type in a paragraph, and then it will beautify it for you. And then you look at it, oh, okay. And then you tweak here, tweak a sentence there, a word here, there. Hey, voila, you've got a nice social media post that you can put up already. So it already exists, right? And I think that going forward, GPT and other technologies like this will continue to make lives easier. Will it do us out of a job? I think if you stop being creative, then it will, right? If you are not, and I think that, prompt engineers, it's those people who write the prompts, they won't go out of job, because if you are creative, then, you can write the prompts that deliver the results that you want. But don't forget that this web tool technologies, they are called the cloud. And you call Kubernetes and Dockers and containers. Some of you have written about that, right? They refer to no shipping docks, no shipping containers. But how do you explain that? How do you make that, tell the business leader that it's important. Actually, they're all part of the infrastructure that makes Web3 work, because Web3 needs the cloud to store all of that information. 300 billion words, that's what GPT has learned. 197 billion parameters. And in the blink of an eye, you write a prompt, in the blink of an eye, the answer comes out. How do you think it all happens? It's the cloud. So do we join the dots? I think we need to join the dots. Right? And we need to explain how it all happens for people. I know sometimes it is not easy, you know, but you, by the way, I'm a geographer by training. I'm not a computer scientist. So, but you learn, and you have to learn the basics and the concepts so that you can join the dots.
I use this opportunity to thank ChatGPT for putting quantum computing as the first question explained quantum computing in layman terms. So it was very helpful to popularize our technology. I hope you all clicked on the.
Well, since we are on the topic of ChatGPT, let's dive a little bit deeper into it, right? So from all of your perspectives, do you think it would be helpful in the work that we do on an everyday basis, right? We've seen, for example, some publications like CNET already using AI to write articles. Could it be helpful for people amongst us who are not super passionate about writing press releases and op-eds? You know, could it help us in that way? And have you personally used it in your everyday work?
Yeah, so I think it was in the news some time ago. My colleague Weldon was telling me about how BuzzSumo announced it would start using ChatGPT to create content, and their share prices went up. So there's clearly a lot of, you know, like positive sentiment and expectations around this. I have personally used ChatGPT to create LinkedIn posts, or when I've, you know, faced like a creative block, to help me, you know, edit something or spark new ideas. But I think when used at scale, so just this morning I woke up to an announcement in our organization that we're integrating ChatGPT into our Meltwater platform to do 3 things. So it's going to help social media managers create content as well as images. So you talked about DALL-E using saving money,
Yeah.
not paying for copyright images, and being able to use DALL-E for that. So that integration is happening in our platform. Another thing that we're using ChatGPT for is classification of content. So for example, you're JP Morgan and you want to find out about all of the conversations around the SVB bankruptcy. So you can use that integration to categorize all of the content you're seeing. And then a third one is summarizing. Right. So when you're monitoring your brand, you want to see what conversations are happening about your brand in a particular geography. Currently, you're having to scroll through all of the search results that get shown when you're using a media monitoring platform. But with the integration of AI, you can ask a platform to summarize for you what are the main themes that are coming out of all of the coverage that you've received. So I think there's lots of potential, and I'm not really worried about anybody losing jobs at this point. I think we've got some ways to go.
I think that it will ChatGPT and all of these AI tools will become part and parcel of what we do. Okay, so there's pattern recognition in this endoscoping is already taking place. Prediction models. So AI is not just generative AI, right? So pattern recognition is one, prediction models are another. So let's not lump AI and just say that generative AI equals AI. It is not. You know, there are other forms of AI. So and they're used together. They're sometimes blended together and sometimes they're used separately. But just bear in mind that if you're using generative AI, that it is like a Wikipedia. So what do you do with Wikipedia? That could be your first source of finding information, but you need to check that information. So I think that you need to do your due diligence. Use it by all means. I mean, it is a productive tool, but then do check.
Sure. Maybe I can bring an example of how we use ChatGPT in my company. So we are a very small company, so if you need to brainstorm with your peers, it becomes a bit complicated. So, and here you would have ChatGPT. So when we were preparing a visual for the Chinese New Year, okay, so it's a year of a rabbit. We are working in a quantum computing company, and we asked the ChatGPT to bring some examples where we can associate rabbits and quantum computing. And one of the ideas was to say that a quantum computer is a bit shaped like a carrot, so you could have a rabbit with this carrot, which looks like a quantum computer. And so we used this idea, but we ordered the visual to a real human designer, and I think my boss was absolutely kind of very happy with this visual. And in the company there is transparency on the usage of ChatGPT. My boss regularly calls it as a very motivated and fast intern, so it really facilitates your job, but you still need to do the job after and the due diligence, and you're responsible for your output.
Yeah, I think so. I think it seems like ChatGPT is, after all, going to be a really great helper / companion. But for those of you thinking it might help you write your press releases, maybe not anytime soon. Actually, before I came here, I did this kind of semi-meta activity where I asked ChatGPT how it could help us in PR, what it could contribute in our everyday work. So I think the three responses that they gave. One is to generate content, like I think we mentioned. I mean, sure, it might not be a full piece, but I think it can definitely help to kickstart some ideas, especially when sometimes you have writer's block. I think second is to answer simple FAQs. I think sometimes you go for media briefing and stuff. Sometimes you just want some basic industry FAQs, or just to get, like Upali mentioned, just to get a quick summary of what's happening, and I think that's very useful. I think lastly, what it said was to monitor brand reputation, because I think it can take a summation of what's happening in the online world and give you the key insights. Though I tried it earlier this morning, and unfortunately the ChatGPT can't pull real-time insights, so I think it's mostly based on what's in the past. Okay, so I think moving forward, I think a big part also about getting our messages across also is being able to tell a very clear and compelling story. So how can we make sure that the stories or the press release we write, and not just features like Grace mentioned just now, how can we make sure that these content are impactful? And also, especially when it comes to more complex topics, how can we make them more understandable and digestible? And maybe even from a platform perspective, what are insights that we can get from platform to help us better connect our story to the audiences that we are trying to reach?
Yeah, so the way I see it, I think as comms professionals, our job is to tell the right stories to the right people at the right time. And I'm a marketing professional that works for a company that sells marketing products. And so we try to use our own products as much as possible to do our jobs. And so if you break down that the right stories to the right people at the right time or the right context, what are the right stories? It depends on what your audience cares about at that point in time, right? So listening to conversations that are happening on traditional media, on social media, and using social listening to tap into what is important, what is topical, what is current. The second is the right people, right? So we have a product called Readily, which helps us with audience insights. So it gives us things like the demographics of your audience, what kind of publications are they consuming content on, what kind of topics are they interested in, what kind of influencers do they follow. So using that information, you can figure out which publications to target, for example. And then finally, context, right? What are the channels we should be engaging our audience through? We talked about influencer marketing, right? That's been on the rise of late. And so which influencers are connecting with your audience, and is that then a potential channel for comms professionals to explore to get your brand message out there?
Maybe I can share my own experience. So it's working on very different messages for the same topic. Now, we recently announced the implementation of quantum internet with a quantum node in our office, and obviously there are very different levels of message for what it is useful for more general public. And then when we speak to specialized audience, they want really technical explanations that me personally I cannot understand on what type of devices we use, how the connection was built, etc. So we do invest time in building these very different messages for these different audiences.
I think clear, compelling stories. So, just taking off where both my panelists have said, it's a consumer electronics, very easy to write. It's the review of a phone, review of a printer, the new broadband, etc. Very easy. And people are always interested in shiny, new, sexy gadgets, right? When it comes to enterprise tech, it's very difficult. As I say, who wants to know about containers, Kubernetes, and Dockers? So but it is nonetheless very important. So I would suggest that you look at how one way is to look at how your customer use the technology and tell the story through them. So in the Sengkang General Hospital event that I went to, they had two patients who spoke about their experience of, going for an endoscopy and how this new technology helped the doctors discover the cancerous polyps faster than would have been. So it's a way, and it's very interesting, right? I've never been to a healthcare event where they actually bring patients forward and say, hey, interview my patients, and all PDPA side, so they're quite willing to share their story. So I think that this is something that's interesting. At the intersection of tech with another industry, so tech and healthcare, tech and retail, tech and finance, tech and manufacturing, metaverse, how it is used in trading for semiconductor companies, etc. I think this is how you explain the technology and make it sexy. Otherwise, it's a challenge. And I've done this for over 30 years. I know that it's a challenge. Sometimes you see me going back to you and say, hello, help me understand this so that I can write more.
Yeah, I think just building off Grace's point also, I think it's on the flip side of telling like clear and compelling stories. And I think this is something that we are probably all guilty of, is the use of tech jargons, right? So for my panelists here, what do you think about using tech jargons? And when you see press releases or stories, do you think like we use them too much?
Don't use them. Just use them.
Yeah, I think in an industry such as ours, where there's so much innovation happening, it's hard to step away from jargon to a certain extent. Yanina and I were chatting about this earlier. In her industry, you have scientists who are responsible for producing this, and they have limited, they prefer to use technical jargon, right? So then it becomes a comms professional's job to simplify it and communicate that. So I don't think jargon is a bad thing, but I think as comms professionals, we probably need to work a bit harder to explain what that jargon really means to our audience and why they should care about it.
From my perspective, this feeling of the jargon, it's obviously our work that isn't well done about matching the level of message with the audience we are talking to. And it is true that our scientists have prefer to speak in the scientific terms sometimes, and in this case the work is on educating around these topics. And I guess many years ago when someone first said the word cloud, I was couldn't understand what it means, and then today it's a very it's a common term for every one of us. So for quantum computing, there will be some work on explaining what some words that are extremely complicated, what do they mean.
Some years ago, when we talked about antivirus, and one of my bosses said, just go buy Bygone, and then you throw all the viruses. So yes, I think Google, who knew about Google today, Google is the word, Google is used as well. Right? So I think that the jargon does get into the language, but I think that you also need to explain. Wall Street Journal today still explains what GDP is. So I think that it behooves all of us, because there are new readers every day. It's not all readers. We have new readers every day, and new readers need to be educated.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes I think one of the sometimes why we use jargons ourselves is sometimes we don't even understand it deeply enough to convey it simply. So sometimes it's really have to ask people who are telling the stories to deeply understand it. You know, whether it's doing our part to understand it and translating it, or working with the media and journalists that we are working with to help them understand those new technologies as well. I mean, you can't expect journalists to know all about the topics, about everything under the sun. So I think that's an opportunity as well. So hopefully, you know, that's one of the goals that we have to plug this group a little bit again. Join our LinkedIn group is to form a community to help people understand tech a little bit more. So maybe just one last question before we open it the floor for Q&A. I would say for all the panelists, how do you think we could have done better in 2022 from a PR perspective? And what advice do you have for us in the year ahead?
I think last year was the year of the crypto fallout. So I think that it would have been easy, somebody could have explained blockchain much better. What is centralized and decentralized, what is hybrid and public blockchain, etc. I think that's where we missed it out.
Well, what we could do better, we will keep explaining our technology to a more general audience. So it's an ongoing journey. And what I would say, rather than 2022, it is this example of Silicon Valley Bank, which is a cautionary tale to all of us. And I think it again puts the spotlight on the importance of telling storytelling correctly, because the press release, I don't know if you tried to read it, Silicon Valley Bank had a lot of jargon, and so I guess it's a lesson that we all need to learn, and it's a way to acknowledge our role and the importance of when we don't want sometimes to simplify jargon. It's still some work that has to be done.
Yeah, I think very similar to what Grace and Yanina said. Just tell better stories, back to that first point, tell more positive stories and better storytelling, less jargon, less product features, more database storytelling perhaps.
And this year saw more explanation of AI.
So for all of you who are sending stuff to Grace, at least you know what she's looking out for. Okay, I think we have some time for questions for our panelists. Do we have any questions from anyone here? Or do we have any online? I have a question. So this is about generative AI. I was talking to my friends that were accountants. I always thought that AI would come for them first before it came for us. And instead, right, it is the creative industry, right? It's the wordsmiths that got sort of hit first. Why do you think is that? Because you think that something like accounting would be far easier to sort of replicate.
I think you're right.
Okay. I hazard a guess. So when the machine is taught on 300 billion words, it's what they are able to chop and open, right? I think accounting and numbers, financial numbers are not public except that for what you can find in the public documents. So I don't know how much they are able to learn, what is the percentage of 300 billion words, what is the 197 billion parameters, what are they built on? So I already say. But even if they came at the creative people and the wordsmith, and I agree with her, it is not the end. I think it is just the start. It's how you can use that technology to your advantage.
So I think we're seeing what we're seeing because creative writing is subjective, right? It's not an exact science, and what is good writing can be different according to different people. Accounting is an exact science. There is a right and then there's a wrong, right? So you can check for the wrong, and there have been many instances where ChatGPT has been proven to be wrong, like it's thrown out spurious content. And so I think because the field that we're in is so subjective, it's hard to judge what is good. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
Let me go. Okay, the question is.
I want to know what is the best tech pitch, B2B tech pitch that you ever received?
Oh my God.
I'm not machine. I can't remember over 35 years what has happened. But I think the best pitch would be a combination of explaining the technology, offering the person, offering a tech expert to explain the technology, maybe a customer, and think big. Don't think in terms of just little square box. Think in terms of how you can do a spread, for example. And so what goes into a spread? Well, it would be a customer, a use case study, for example. It would be the person who developed it. It would be another story about pros and cons, challenges. So I think that when you talk about a pitch like this, if you're talking about generative AI, and you want to do something in this field, then I would do this.
What excites you?
What do you mean? What excites me? What specifically?
You're talking about tech PR. What excites you? What excites you about the future?
Oh, what excites me about the future is that technology is boundless. Technology is now becoming so ubiquitous that it is everywhere. And I would like to know more about genomics, for example. I would like to know about tech and health science, healthcare, nutrition. I think those are the areas that will be interesting. So I give you another example, and you can pitch me if you want, but I don't know how many of you are in this area. During the lockdown, a major semiconductor company here used AR and the metaverse to train their stuff. So that's interesting, right? It is training, it is technology, it is semiconductor. It hits all ticks all the right boxes. So if you have an opportunity like this, go for it.
Okay, so first thanks for sharing how you guys chat GPT and you be very honest and making influence this kind of assistance to use it too. So I like how we use it as tools if we all understand that, because it's like how the calculator was invented. It didn't stop us from learning math. It actually made us think of how we can adapt our ways of learning and grow our knowledge even more. So I guess to you guys, my question would be, what would be the key traits or skills that like PR and calls for action have to actually like hold in and improve on, and what would be the steps to stand out from the others?
Anyway, for those online, there was a question about how with the tools such as ChatGPT, what kind of skills or knowledge that PR people need to actually improve on or work on so that we don't lose out to the robots.
Well, I think it is a skill maybe that we partly have and that we will need to further develop. It's this prompt engineering. We all have this story that we need to tell, and we need to put it in the right words. Sometimes it's a very complicated story and you need to put it in simple words. Sometimes it's something small and then you want to give it a very big perspective. We speak about quantum internet. You draw a parallel with a history of how transformative classical internet was for us, and that's where people have these sparkles in their eyes, and it really kind of sparkles interest. And so there will be a shift in this prompt engineering. So how can I formulate very well what I want to say, or what kind of visual I want to have, and what kind of response to social media posts I want to have.
I think what will set us apart from the robots is creativity. Generative AI, ChatGPT 3, 4 have all, they repackage data that is already there. They're not adding anything to it. They're not learning from it yet. In another 5 years, that might look very different. But the current state of generative AI is it's just repackaging, summarizing, repurposing. If that's what we're doing, then we're in trouble. But as human beings, we're inherently creative creatures. And I feel like that's what we need to teach our children. That's what we need to teach our young professionals, and bring that into whether it's education, whether it's training on the job. That's what we should be doing.
I think in an inquiring mind, right? So when you read, is this true, is this false? So even if it sounds right, but I think I better check. So I think it is, we need to spend a little bit more time checking. So integrity, yeah. Integrity and the rest.
Yep, so actually we have one online question. Let me just read it out. In today's rapidly changing media landscape, it's evident that both traditional and social media play significant roles in shaping public opinion and brand perception. As a media monitoring company working with both types of media, we've observed that the PR sector sometimes struggle to keep pace with these changes. How can the PR industry adapt more effectively to the evolving media landscape? And what strategies do you recommend for PR professionals to stay up to date with the latest trends in media monitoring and analysis?
A lot to unpack. Yeah, so I think that as PR professionals, we've historically, so I've been doing this for 19 years now. Traditional media has been where we've focused. A lot of our efforts have been focused on that, and that's still where we spend most of our efforts. But traditional media helps shape opinion over time. Social media is where opinions conversations are happening and opinions are being created on the spot. So I think as PR professionals, we need to start bringing that into our mix a little bit more. And, like I mentioned earlier, I think you need to listen to the conversations that are being had out there. So that's where media monitoring plays a role. Social media monitoring or listening is another thing. Social listening is another thing that we should be doing. Understanding your audience and then identifying the channels through which you should be telling these stories. And I mean, I can put a plug, but yeah, Meltwater does all of that. So if you want to talk about that, please come and have a chat with me.
Do we have any more questions? If not, thanks so much to our panelists for being here today, and I think everyone for joining us both in person and online. I think if you enjoyed this session, I think just for those who are here, we have some posters here to join the PRCA APAC Tech Group LinkedIn group, and for those who are online, I think we can share a link. I think that's where you can keep updated on the future events that we may have. And if any of you have ideas about what to do with ChatGPT or tips on how we can use it in our day-to-day work, or any articles or learnings that you can share, feel free to share in the group as well. So as a whole tech PR media community, we can get to learn from one another. All right, thanks so much again. And I think just a shout out also to the PRCA APAC Tech Committee for pulling this together. And yeah, go ahead and enjoy the food and drink when you're